there too. Brian Cody, Evan Shefflin. I understand what you're saying, that there is an opportunity for someone. I'm just not sure if Clara are in the sort of form needed to, I suppose, maybe expose what could be potential chinks in the Ballyhale armour.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Now, James Stephens against Mullinavat is another fairly finely poised one. I wonder will Owen Larkin play here, and would they use him in the forwards or the back line? Because we saw him centre back last year, but obviously he's over the years been probably one of Kilkenny's best forwards and probably not always celebrated to the level that he should have been. At the other side, you have Mullinavat team that are very big and strong. John Walsh was on fire last week, put up a huge score against Danesfort, which is no mean feat off Paul Murphy. They're a balanced team, don't really have stars. They're also the Gaelic football champions, and they did quite well in Leinster last year. They have Paddy Mullally, who's he's their manager. It sort of sets them up defensively, but can hit you on the counter. So James Stephens will have to watch out for that.
They definitely will. I know from even chatting to a few lads from the village, they definitely be on guard against Mullinavat because I think they beat them in a group game maybe 2 years ago and were very, very competitive with them last year. As you said, a big, strong, physical side. Mike Malone, who I played a bit of hurling with in college, again, a big kind of physical kind of force that have loads of lads like that. I suppose a big thing, like we talked about John Walsh and maybe some of the reasons maybe why he wasn't in with Kilkenny or why he should be in there. I suppose given another consistent performance like he did last weekend, or chipping in with 4 or 5 points, that'll be probably one of the telltale things with him about maybe whether he gets a Kilkenny recall, or whether he's going to be able to deliver that kind of consistency. I'm sure the village will target him and try and reduce his effect on the game. But I just think I think the village have been tipping away quite nicely. They rested 3 or 4 of their bigger guns for the Shield final against Clara, and I just think Cheddar Plunkett will have them ready to go. I think they'll definitely be on guard against Mullinavat because they are a dangerous side. But I see the city side coming through here.
Yeah, I'd be the same. Danesfort against Tullaroan, so if you were to kind of reduce it down to the biggest names, Richie Hogan against Tommy Walsh. To be fair to Tullaroan, like we've talked about the very tough ride they had throughout the group stages, and they were never disgraced, up against really big teams. Ballyhale, they had them all but beaten. Was it James Stephens then that pushed them pretty close, Bennett's Bridge, and then obviously now they're in a relegation semi-final. But the stuff they've hurled is probably above relegation level.
Yeah, and as you said, I think the key thing is there was no clangor or anything thrown in. They've been really, really consistent the whole way through. Even like they were barely beaten. They were barely beaten in their last knockout game as well, but by Comer by I think it was a point in the end. So like and as I said, we've gone through the spine before. You have young Tommy Walsh, Pádraig Walsh, you have Martin Keoghan centre forward, and you have Tommy full forward, and throw Shane Walsh in there into the mix as well. So like I fancy Tullaroan here. I think Danesfort missed the boat a bit last weekend. They produced a brilliant performance against Mullinavat, and they just weren't able to get over the line in normal time. Richie Hogan had 7 or 8 from play, and I just don't know. Like I think Tullaroan it's a fair warning for them to make sure that, I don't know if it's Pádraig Walsh or whoever picks up Richie Hogan, but if they can neutralise him to some effect, I just think they have a bit more up the far end, and I think they're less reliant on their big men. Their big men are important players for them, but I think on the wings and in the corners, I just think they're a small bit stronger, and it'd be an awful shame. I know you get nothing for nothing, but it'd be an awful shame to see Tullaroan end up in a relegation final, beating a point or two, given how consistent they've been the whole way through the championship and the 3 games that they had in the group. But I think they'll just get over this one just about.
Yeah, and I wonder who'll pick up Shane Walsh. Will it be Paul Murphy at one end, and at the other end, I don't see Pádraig Walsh picking up Richie Hogan. Now, if Richie Hogan stands in at number 11, which he has done over the years, and there's a fair chance he will, maybe Pádraig will play there. But I was wondering, will younger Tommy Walsh, who's been in contention in the full back line with Kilkenny, would they just think, right, Tommy, you go out and just sicken Richie for the 60 minutes here and shut him down, and we'll worry about the rest of it?
Yeah, he's really effective. He's really effective at shutting down top players, in fairness to him. So that might be an option. Depends how much you're willing to kind of shuffle your deck. Like he's a real safe pair of hands at the edge of the square. There's not too many lads that get in handy past him, and I think it's only a matter of time. He's obviously had a chance with the seniors already. Was kind of on and then kind of ended up going off, but I think it's only a matter of time. Maybe whether it's this winter or next year, where he'll probably end up in, a regular in defence. So that's an option too. I suppose they have to weigh it up, whether it's worth the cause and effect of it. What effect can he have on neutralising Richie Hogan, and what will the effects of him moving away from the square be for the rest of the team? But I'm sure they'll have a plan. Maybe they play a sweeper as well, put some man marking Richie and have someone dropping in behind as well, which could be Pádraig Walsh. But it'd be interesting to see. And I just think Tullaroan have more options, I think, than Danesfort, and I kind of see them coming through. And the other game is really, really interesting, because it looks like the Roar are going to have a fair whack of the lads that were missing last weekend back, if not all of them. That's Kieran Joyce, Richie Leahy, Joe Ling, Tom Murphy, and Jim Ryan, who was a Kilkenny under-20 last year. So, wonder.
The talk is that they were playing possum last week, in the sense that they could have put all those lads in against Ballyhale, where they got beaten out the gate. Was it something like 34 points? But the word is, and now we haven't got any official word from their camp, that they were like, let's keep the boys for next week. We're going to lose to Ballyhale anyway, so we might as well have them ready, because it's a short turnaround in the space of a week. Imagine chasing after TJ Reid, Colin Fennelly and all those guys, and then you have to come around a week later and play against Greg Ballycallan. That'd be tough going. Now, Billy Ryan did play last week for Greg Ballycallan, but I think he's still carrying an injury. Conor Murphy is shooting the lights out. Eddie Brennan is not involved. Now, he came on for the junior team in the county final against Lisdowney last week, and I think he made a bit of a difference, but they lost that game anyway. So they're obviously not playing with a fully strength team at the moment. If Billy Ryan is out there, probably going around on one leg.
No, definitely not. And we're talking about teams kind of. This is a really funny one, because you have two teams who haven't been consistent at all, and with what you're kind of possibly implying about the Roar, it's almost like a horse not running on his merits one week in a bad race, and then you're putting it in a good race the week after and expecting it to run on its merits, and you're hoping that it will step up. The lads that were playing for the Roar last week, their confidence is probably not hectic this week, just given the shellacking that they took last week. So it's an interesting one. If there is some truth to that, you can kind of see the logic behind it, because their bigger picture is they're probably not going to win a county title, particularly if lads are carrying bits and knocks or not 100%, and staying up is their sole priority, really. So it's a big game, tough one to call. There's so many variables. Will all five of those lads start? Will they all be fit? How fit is Billy Ryan? So it's a tricky one to call. You don't have much form or basis to go on, particularly from the Roar point of view.
And obviously, if anyone has any comments that they want to get in, feel free there to reply to @OurGameHQ, to @ML Verney or @Shane Saint, and we'll talk about it if we see them in time. You were mad to do a Kilkenny power rankings. You're 1 to 12, I suppose, even. So fly through it there and then watch people tear you asunder.
Yeah, no, and I'll try and explain the logic of it. So obviously there's a lot of little variables, as I said there, with different teams. But this is kind of what I've gone for. Ballyhale number 1, back-to-back All-Ireland champions. Yes, there are some question marks about Henry being gone, and obviously Mick Fennelly being gone, and Adrian Mullen been out. But they're back-to-back All-Ireland champions. They know how to get the job done. They have the form in the book, and I would they still have to be beaten. Number 2 are Dixborough, county champions a couple of years ago. Their main man, Killian Buckley, is back fit, and I just think they're going to be hard beaten. They're going to be thereabouts. O'Loughlin Gales, number 3, obviously beaten Ballyhale already this year. Might not have enough to win a county title, but if Ballyhale were taken out, they could. They mightn't beat them a second time, but if Ballyhale were taken out, they could. James Stephens are 4. I think they're tipping away nicely, beaten in last year's county final, obviously, by Ballyhale, and I think they're coming nicely. It looks like the likes of Keane Kenny, it looks like Conor Brown is kind of coming of age as well. They still have Matt Root and a few other lads up front, David Walton. They're number 4. Clare are 5. I just think they've dropped a bit. The Bridge are 6. Erin's Own 7. Mulnavat 8. And then when we go down to the kind of relegation last 4, Tullaroan, the Roar, Danesfort, and Greg Ballycallan. So essentially, I think outside of Tullaroan, the other 3, the Roar, Danesfort, and Greg Ballycallan, it's going to be very, very tight. But if the Roar have everyone back and they're back fit, even if they were to lose this week, I still think if they had those 5 lads available the week after and they had a game under the belt, they'd be very, very hard beaten in a relegation final. I always think it's hilarious to have a relegation final, because the final should be something you should be aspiring to get to, and nobody aspires to get into a relegation final. But that's my power rankings.
Okay, and anyone that agrees or disagrees, please get your comment in, and even a suggestion. What should you call a relegation final to highlight the negativity of the situation? Cavan this weekend. So East Cavan Gales are against Cootehill Celtic, Pierce Oaks are against Mullahoran and St Joseph's. Moving on to Clare. Now there's only one semi-final this weekend because of course things were, or quarter-final on this weekend, because of course things have been held up down there with the COVID situation and Cratloe and games having to be played. But it's Aero Guinness against Fecal. Now Fecal are on the back of wins against Whitegate by 5, and then I think they beat Clare Castle kind of pulling up, whereas Aero were beaten by 6 Mile Bridge, haven't played well, and then they beat Cratloe. So like what I'm hearing here is you've got a neat nippy team in Aero up against big physical men in Fecal, and if it's a dirty day, if it's a physical match, you're looking more like Fecal are going to win. But if Aero Guinness played on their terms with Shane O'Donnell, with David Reedy, players like this who absolutely kind of fit into the description of that team as nippy, fast, skillful hurlers, that then they would come out on top.
Yeah, well, you're talking about what the breed of a man in Fecal. When Gerlach Nan is from that parish and people have idolised him growing up, you're bound to be knocking only like bruisers a lot of the time as well. There was a great sketch they did with Gerlach Nan with Connor Sketches, about all the injuries that he played through, or all the injuries throughout his career, and he listed them all out. And he basically was saying about they were all the injuries that he dished out to other people. Well, Fecal have come back well. Like, in fairness, Fecal are back kind of close, just hovering towards the top table in Clare now as well. And just what you're saying there about conditions, it can make a massive thing. Like a wet day, like just say for example, like at inter-county level, I don't think a wet day would possibly suit the likes of Cork. Whereas Kilkenny, you'd imagine, would take you to the trenches on a wet day. I think at club level as well, there are certain teams would prefer a certain type of a day, a certain type of a ball, a dry ball. And probably what you're saying about Air Oak there, they probably want a dry ball. They probably want Shane O'Donnell, David Reedy and these lads to be able to, really utilise their pace, utilise their speed. And again, touch kind of goes out the window a small bit on a wet day. It's so much harder. I think I always find it's an equaliser as well. So the more physical team we would probably favour on a wet day. But I'd say I'd be favouring Ennis here, Aero Guinness. I just think they have a bit more depth to them maybe than Fecal.
Come here though, just at that point you're saying about touch kind of goes out the window a little bit on a wet day. Do you not think to some degree it's even more important, and that the skillful team now, unless it's like really wet and mucky and you actually can't move around the pitch, but if the pitch is still fairly fast, so I would imagine that the ground is still pretty firm, but if it's wet on top of it, it's actually going to make it faster in a way, so therefore your touch might be even better, whereas in November and December what you're saying is true.
I always think on a wet day that defender gets a chance that he doesn't normally get.
Perhaps,
unless your touch is absolutely lightning. I think when a forward goes to a ball, it just goes away from him a bit more. And, the forward has to get the ball in their hand and do something with it. As a defender, I'm kind of thinking, if I just run out with him and put pressure on him, chances are the ball will spill and then it's out of that area and it's up the field a small. That's kind of what I would always say anyway. I always love turning on a wet day. It slows dads down a little bit, and I would find it slows their touch down a small bit as well.
Yeah, so some of the main men for Fecal then, Shane McGrath, very good club hurler. I think he scored something like 310 against Clare Castle. Oisin Donlan, who's son of Alan Donlan, who played with Clare in the late 80s and early 90s. Tommy Guilfoyle's son, Gary, Killian and Raymond Bann. I was talking to Derek Lynch down there in Clare, and he was giving me some of the background on this. But injuries could hurt them. Con Smith and Justin Nelson, now they're two players that won't be out. Now, with having a couple of injuries and a pretty small pick, they have about 20 to pick from, you're in a little bit of bother if you have to go looking for a cavalry in this sort of situation. Now you're snookered as well though, Shane, because like at club level or even county level now, you need finishers. You need 3 or 4 lads that are going to come on and they're not going to weaken your team at all. Yeah, you need to have those options, and when those options are, it's okay if some of those options are taken away from you,
during the game and you get half an hour out of a fella or something like that. But when they're gone before the game, if someone goes off injured after 10 minutes, you're bringing someone in. That means for the last 10 minutes, you mightn't have that lad to come in, or you don't have that freshness to come in. So you need to have, if you don't have 24 or 25 and you only have 20, those 19 or 20 need to be fit. It mightn't hit you straight away, but it would probably hit you at some stage of the game when something goes wrong, or if there's a lad going well, and on one wing back would say there's a lad going well, a wing forward going well, and the other wing back is starting to tire, like you can't switch them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah,
robs you of some of your options.
Yeah. Now on the Éire Óg side, Aaron Fitzgerald, he's a Clare footballer. He's back from injury. David Reedy, they'd hope he's a little bit fitter, because I think he was probably only 70% fit the last day. With Shane O'Donnell, you'd think, have him inside and get the ball to him and watch him, do his usual thing. But I think he's playing closer to like the 45s, a bit further out the field. But I think he does tend to go back in as well. Danny Russell will be a huge player for them. Tough one to call. Most people that I've talked to would have said, but in general, Éire Óg is the team that people are fancying here. We'll keep an eye on it, especially those injuries for Fecal too could make things a bit more problematic. We'll move on to the Dublin Championship this weekend. Obviously, I'm going to have to kind of sit it out a little bit when we talk about Lucan Sarsfields against Cuala. But one thing for sure you would have to talk about is that forward line and the ball winning ability. Having Chris Crummy, who moved up to the forwards for Dublin during the league earlier this year. Obviously Dublin are lacking a couple of ball winners up there and a bit of a presence. He's centre forward, and Paul Crummy, his brother, left-hander, he's full forward, and they're both real handfuls.
Yeah, no, in fairness to you, I thought Crokes had kind of come through, not easy enough, but I thought they'd come through that quarter final, and you made a compelling enough case for Lucan. You obviously go down through the spine of their team, and you throw in Johnny McCaffrey as well, who was obviously captain Dublin to Leinster in 2013, and I would have played against him in Leinster in the 21 final, and the whole way up basically. I think he captained Dublin in a Leinster minor final in 04 or 05, I think, as well. Very good player. Ben Coffey as well, good, very, very good free taker, good forward. They have plenty of options, and if with the two Crummies there, and particularly Chris Crummy, he could dominate a game from centre forward if they're able to get him on the ball. Now Cuala, to be fair, and you know this better than anyone else, like Cuala are defensively pretty savvy, and there'd probably be someone maybe sitting even behind Chris Crummy. I'd imagine they'd be trying to break ball and just make sure that he doesn't catch ball. The interesting thing about Cuala is they obviously won 4 of the last 5 titles. They were beaten by Nafina, which mightn't necessarily have been a bad thing, because obviously it wasn't a knockout game, so they had time to regroup. Beat St. Bridget's easily. One of the big questions is, and you're not going to reveal it, I'm sure, is whether Con will play, and that's a massive, massive thing. Like, Con is 1-4, 1-5 up front, even the option of being able to move out to the half-hour line as well. I believe he's carrying a bit of a knee injury. The Cuala footballers are out next weekend as well, I think. So he's had a good bit of traffic on his legs. So whether he's going to be 100% fit for this weekend is probably crucial. I'm not saying it'll tip the scales, because I still think Cuala will win anyway, but it's massively important whether he's fit or not. And I just think it was interesting as well that the Dublin CCC, Dublin County Board, basically moved all the county finals back a week, the hurling of football back a week, basically because Ballyboden's dual contingent and because of Cuala's dual contingent. And I just think that probably has a little effect on Desi Farrell and Matty Kenny's plans as well at county, because the hurling finals will now take place in September 19 and 20, which is a week after county training is allowed to start back again, while the football decider takes place on September 26 and 27, which is probably even more key when you're talking about Dublin's 6 in a row bid, that potentially he'd be without players, some of his star men, for at least 2 weeks and probably 3 weeks by the time they're rested. So they'll only be back in with Dublin on October 1st.
Luckily, they only have to play the Leinster Football Championship, so they'll be walking through that anyway.
That's true too, but has there ever been a manager that has been, come into a squad, a high-profile squad, that has had less time with his squad and less pressure, less official time anyway? So they haven't been allowed to train officially. So I think that's an interesting one there. You've all the dual players. That's why they moved it back. The likes of Colin Keeney and Simon Lambert with Ballyboden, and you obviously have Con and probably Mark Schutte. I don't think Fitzsimon's don't think Mick Fitzsimons is starting for the hurlers yet.
No, I'd say I've only seen him at hurling training a handful of times over the years. He's not bad now, as you can imagine. He's as athletic as they come, and if he gets the ball, he can solo with it, and best of luck trying to keep into him, but probably not the tastiest of hurlers. Yeah, you'd have to say that. But that's a very fair point about Desi Farrell. No manager would have ever had these circumstances before. Of course, we haven't had any sort of a virus like this or pandemic in recent times. I mean, 100 years ago, you can go back to the Spanish flu and what have you. But this is very difficult for him. And not only that, history has already been created. The 5 in a row is already done. So to some degree, you kind of wonder, will any players lose the appetite? Now, maybe they won't. But there's got to be some players who think, oh, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not giving it the same level. Or I've had a few months off here and I realised I like the finer things in life.
I know this is hurling, chap, but I just think it's interesting because Dublin are so systematic, and you just think they're probably, I know this might sound a bit silly, but I think they're probably the best educated football team in the way that they play, the systems that they play. It's so smart. It looks like they've had an awful lot of contact time. It looks like they've really kind of honed in on, you know, the process, shall we say. It is really, really methodical, whereas that hasn't been allowed to happen this year. And you throw Jack McCaffrey missing into the mix. I think it's interesting from Matty Kenny's point of view. He's got a squad that to me was a bit all over the place earlier on in the year, and he's going to be denied them for another week as well, so it probably puts him back a week too. If you look at, if you have, just say you have Coola and Ballyboden or Coola and Nafina in the final, he's going to be missing a good third of his squad. So I think that's an interesting debate. The other semi-final is very, very interesting too. You probably have the experience and nous of Ballyboden coming up against a Nafina side that are only trying to break through. They're trying to kind of put their stamp on things. They obviously beat Coola earlier on in the year, which can be a good and a bad thing. So they announced themselves. They're no longer waiting in the long grass or anything like that. They've kind of maybe heaped a bit of pressure on themselves, and I think that's an interesting game. With the likes of Donald Burke, Sean Curry, AJ Murphy, who was with the 21s a couple of years ago as well. That's coming up against probably a Boden side who were beaten in the 2018 Leinster Club final. Probably Conal Keeney, who's just a phenomenon how he does it week on week. Played extra time with the footballers last weekend against Raheny. The likes of him, Paul Ryan, Niall McMorrow, probably Simon Lambert. They had a convincing win against Vincent's, having been hammered in their first game by Crokes. So they're kind of, again, an experienced side. They seem to be coming right just at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Burke's an excellent forward, and Matty Kenny will be keeping a close eye on him. Martin Quilty, of course, came up at 1-2. He would have been a Dublin midfielder there about 5 years ago. He would have been in and around, good player as well. And that thing about Nafina getting the breakthrough win against Coola in the last group game and winning it pretty comprehensively. It was 6 points, but Coola even got 2 late goals just to bring it back. And it reminded me of 2012 in the final group game, and it ended up being a knockout game in a way. Ballyboden had won 5 in a row, and we played them in the last group game, and we won that game, and that was the sort of one that gave us the confidence to go on and do what we did later down the line. So I wonder for Nafina, there's probably that balance between, did we get that win at the wrong time in terms of it wasn't a knockout game, and then the flip side is, look, we've shown we're as good as anybody in Dublin, so why can't it be us? So I think that's why it's poised so finely. And even Boden, like as we talked about a few times now, to lose that first game so comprehensively against Kilmacud, that'll feel like ancient history at this stage. They'll feel like we've generally had the edge over Nafina over the years, and plenty of other teams, so why not us again?
Yeah, no, 100%, yeah. And again, it's probably not that it's young against old, but it's the young pretenders against the really experienced kind of wily kind of veterans in general. And I think the bookies have it evens each of 2, and that's probably about right. It's a difficult game to call now, and I couldn't confidently call either of them, to be honest with you, because you're just thinking Boden are starting to come right just when they need to, and you're thinking Nafina are just edging towards a breakthrough. From a Nafina point of view, if they can get to a final having beaten Coola and having beaten Ballyboden, it will be massive for them, and to be in an ideal position to win a first county final in a good while. But yeah, it's going to be tough to get there.
And just to say, we're brought to you by Slattery Sullivan Insurances. If you want 10% of all new business quotes, call 067 56705 and use the reference our game. The Galway quarterfinals this weekend. So, you know, it was the preliminary quarterfinals last weekend where A meets B in terms of the senior A and B. St. Thomas's against Kilkenny Daly is the first one we'll talk about. And when I talk to some locals in Galway, they're talking about Thomas's wiping the floor with Kilkenny Daly here. You know that Brian Kincannon will only be able to do so much on his own. That a team with Davy Burke, Conor Cooney, Shane Cooney at centre back, that it's just not really going to be put up to Thomas's here.
Yeah, it's going to be hard in fairness. Kilkenny Daly aren't a bad side, but they're coming up against a really seasoned Thomas's side, going for 3 in a row, and like when you go down through, like it's a fairly star-studded team. Throw Fintan Burke in there on top of it, a lad who can control a game, particularly if he's playing in defence. They put up that.
There's a question for you. Last year in the All-Ireland semi-final, and after he came back from the Cruciate in the Galway Club Championship, he was playing in the forward line. And would you rather see him in the forward and the backs? Is it a case that, right, he's got skill, you can never have too many scorers in a team, let's get him in the forward line, because it's easier to find wing backs. I think everyone knows that. So let's try and put him somewhere where we can do damage. Or are you losing a bit of something from him by not having him in his best position?
I think you do lose something from him. I'd have him at 7 or probably 6 every day of the week. And I just think when a lad comes back from injury, I played cornerback all my life. I came back from injury last year and I was kind of shoved into the forwards because it's just kind of easier. You're not upsetting the flow of the team nearly as much. And I think that was more with him. He came on around midfield, half forward, scored 2 points in the county final. And I think it's easier to slip a guy in there. But he's obviously been fit for all of this season. And I'm going to assume that he's been back in his regular spot. I just think he can have way more of an influence on the game in the half back line. I think, to be honest with you, I think he could score as much from half back as he could at half forward. Yeah, because he's that type of a player.
Well, if you're a player who's not used to having your back to goal, at times it can be difficult to get the ball, turn and go with it, because you're so used to facing the play as a wing back. You're almost waiting, coming onto it, and then you can strike on the front foot. So that can be difficult. So we're both going to go with Thomas's there. Capitagle against Ahascra Fahina. So Ahascra have had a couple of late shows in recent times, and obviously everyone knows the Manions there. How do you see this going? Damien Joyce buttressing the defence of Capitagle.
What Ahascra have done, if Ahascra can continue their winning ways, I reckon to be a documentary or some sort of a film.
Start buying lottery tickets.
Yeah, I've some sort of a drama thriller made about them, because the last 2 games they've scored 2 goals in injury time, basically to not rob, but they've been 2 smash and grabs really. That they have.
They were robbers.
Well, listen. I don't think they deny it. I don't think they deny it either. And kind of, I was chatting to Patrick early there from Galway, the freelance down there. He'd be watching all these matches and just saying that, like, he said he reckoned the Cappy would have to be 10 points up, like in the last 5 minutes, or they'd be fearful of what's coming from Ahascra. Pádraig Mannion's up full forward. He starts full forward for them, and Cathal Mannion plays back the pitch. And I just looking back at it again, Cathal Mannion struck a ball actually from his own 14, and it landed on the edge of the square. We're talking about best ball striker, that best ball striker debate. He was definitely high up in that, and Pádraig Mannion ended up with the winning goal out of that. It's a tough enough game to call. I just imagine, like, Capitagle have been in around here for the last couple of years, beating semi-finalists the last 2 years, very, very close. I think it was Mellows beat them last year. You'd imagine they didn't start off particularly good, but ended up kind of joint top of their group. And I'd imagine they just have enough. Like Ahascra, I just think this could be the sort of game where, a team has won 2 really, really tight games, maybe that they didn't, not that they didn't deserve to win, but that they came from nowhere to win. And you just think maybe the energy might be gone from that, or that possible heroics might be kind of stymied this time around. But I'd be fancying Capitagle just to come through and book. I think it'd be the 3rd semi-final place in a row, I think.
Yeah, and Liam Mellows, I think, are one of the teams that have given them a bit of misery in the semi-finals. They're against Loughrea this weekend. And like Liam Mellows have been regular challenges in recent times, especially after winning their first one. I think was it something like it was 40 plus years under Louis Mulqueen, and they've very much established themselves at the top end of the Galway Championship. Everyone I'm sure knows David Collins, and Tyke Harron is probably one of the best players in the club championship there for a number of years, and I think that's something we want to debate pretty soon actually. Who are the guys that sort of tend to really impress in club championship and even dominate club championship games, but for whatever reason have never fully established themselves as top inter-county players? You know, they might even be skinning a county player week after week, but for whatever reason they don't get backed by county managers. Then on the other side you've Loughrea, Johnny Cohen, everyone knows. I think they have a nice young team coming through, but they'll certainly be outsiders.
Yeah, no, they definitely will be outsiders. Mellows have been really consistent, and they've ran. Thomas was close in the last two finals as well since winning the 2017 one. Louis McQueen is still involved there, in fairness, and he just has them at a level where they're very hard to beat. They did well probably to beat Gart last weekend. They were 3 or 4 points up going into the last quarter. Ended up one down nearly in injury time, and Tyke Harron, who you mentioned there, a brilliant free taker, brilliant from play as well, he struck over 2 frees in injury time to see them through, and they just have that bit of experience. I believe Loughrea are coming, and they've a good few young fellas coming through, but I just think Mellows will be way too seasoned for them. Still have Conor Cavan as a really dangerous forward there up front. As I said, David Collins kind of manning the ship there in the full back line. I just think Mellows will have a bit too much experience and nous for them.
I wonder will this be the year for Turlough. You know, they've more or less county players in every line, you know, or guys who have played with the county. Dahi Burke's there, Ronan Burke's there, there's plenty of other guys. They had that fail of success obviously a number of years ago. Will this be the year where they finally come through? Now, I watched Sarsfields playing against Castlegar about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was very unimpressed with them. They were champions in 2015, so they know what it's like to get to the top of the hill. If you keep the ball away from Joseph Cooney, who looks like just a different breed of an animal to the rest of the players on the team, more or less, if you keep the ball away from him, I don't see how Turlough will lose this game.
No, Turlough are very well drilled. Yeah, they'd be, if anybody's going to break the kind of, not the stranglehold, but the kind of grip that Thomas's and Mellows have had in the last couple of years, is probably going to be them. Dahi Burke captaining from midfield, obviously kept very busy at the moment. Mixing football with Cara Finn and the odd week and playing for Turlough the week after. But like we kind of talked through, they've had like massive failed success over the last 10 years. Franny Ford, who was involved in Micheál Donoghue in 2017 when they won the All-Ireland, and even for the last couple of years he's involved. Not too sure if he's coach or manager, but he's heavily involved. He's obviously a Turlough man himself. Like they're traditional powerhouse in Galway. Haven't won it in a good while, but they have low. I remember playing them under Micheál Donoghue. It could be 14 or 15, and there was lots and lots of potential there, and lots of young fellas there, and a lot of them are still there, and they've had a nice little influx of fresh talent as well. So if they're gonna do it, it's got to be probably pretty soon too. But yeah, I fancy them to come through that. I think the Galway quarterfinals are clear cut enough. Apart from the game that we discussed earlier, the Haskell, Fohanai and Capitagal, but I think the other three are fairly clear cut, and I find it hard to see the three favourites beaten in either.
Yeah, your game with Spur against Sir Kieran last weekend, Clarine, that was put back because of a bereavement, so that game, the second group game in Offaly, is going to go ahead this weekend. Do or die, winners go through and the losers are out, so that's definitely worth keeping an eye on. I won't put you on the spot asking you too much inside info there, just wouldn't be fair, would it?
Oh no, prediction. Yeah, Sir Kieran are red hot favourites going into this. No, listen, it's an interesting one. I'm at home here in Borough at the moment. Sir Kieran is only up the road, and actually I actually ended up spending €80 on their club draw tickets last night. They do an annual draw because one of my best mates is from Clarine. And but no, listen, a lot would centre around probably Joe Bergen and Éanna Murphy for them. Joe didn't play against Coolderry the first day, and from our point of view, a lot would probably centre on Owen Cahill. And it's a massive game for both sides. If you lose, you're out, and you have a dead rubber in the last game. If you win your last game, you're in a semi-final. So all to play for, massive stakes.
Absolutely. The Kerry Senior Hurling Championship semi-finals are on this weekend. Abby Dorney against John Myler's Kilmoyley, which is just unbelievable the way he kept going both Kilmoyley and St. Martin's during this year. Then the other semi-final, Causeway against Ballyduff. Causeway, of course, being the champions. I think they won their first county title in 21 years, something like that, maybe even 31 years. Now, 3-week mid-season break in Limerick. You have a big smiley ahead in you. Do you have someone out the window gawking in at you or something?
My mother is power hosing outside, and I'm trying to make sure that she doesn't start the power hose right in front of my window and ruin the audio for this.
Oh, mothers, huh? If you've any good stories of mothers interrupting you in your sort of GEA scene, let us know. But hey, we'll get back to the Limerick quarterfinals because they're back on this weekend. Ballybrown against Na Piarsaigh and Doon against South Liberties. So there was a 3-week mid-season break here, and we're back again. Ballybrown against Na Piarsaigh. I think most people would just assume Na Piarsaigh are going to walk this, but other people are telling me that Ballybrown could give them a good rattle because Na Piarsaigh haven't been going that well. So Na Piarsaigh, they lost to Kilmallock, that was on TV, and after starting okay, it was very much a case that Kilmallock took over. Graham Mulcahy just absolutely ran the show and they weren't able to keep into it at all. But they beat Ahan, and they beat a Ballybrown team that came through against Blackrock and Gary Spillane. Teams met a couple of years ago and Na Piarsaigh hockeyed them. There was 14 points in it, 221-118. Now Cathal King, Alan Dempsey and Conor Houlihan, they've all been on the treatment table in recent weeks. So I think, but even so, you'd have to fancy that Na Piarsaigh would get through here.
You would, but it's one of these cases where you probably list out and name out all the talent that they have, and you're thinking, oh yeah, like you just imagine they were in an All Ireland club final a couple of years ago, won a club title a few years before that as well. But you probably throw Shane Dowling into the mix as well, who's been a massive player for them and for Limerick, he's not going to see any action this year by the looks of things with his knee, and those three lads that you mentioned there. And they didn't set the world alight earlier on in the year. It didn't look like the Na Piarsaigh side of that play G in those two epic games in the club final. So you kind of balance that off with a Ballybrown side who are emerging a small bit, and I think have scored 9 goals in their 2 games so far. Evan Loftus is in his kind of 5th year as Ballybrown manager, so they'll sniff an opportunity here. They definitely will sniff an opportunity, and it'd be a big scalp to take from a Ballybrown point of view, because everybody would just see Na Piarsaigh as this absolute powerhouse. But this would probably be tighter than you would probably think on paper. You would still imagine Na Piarsaigh could come through, but an upset definitely not out of the question here. Ballybrown are no mugs, in fairness.
Doon against South Liberties, 2 East Limerick rivals playing in the other one. They met in the group stages last year, and Doon won 4-17-111, so that's pretty comprehensive. Now there was draws against Patrickswell and Adair for Doon, so they're now in the quarterfinals. Now they've won an under-21 title in the meantime, which is no mean feat. They don't have Richie English this year, of course, because of his cruciate injury, but they do have Pat Ryan, Darragh O'Donovan and Barry Murphy, among others, so they're obviously very strong. Whereas Liberties beat Moreau Boher and they lost to Monaleen in the group stages. The scoring average got them through to the knockout stages. Barry Nash, he scored a hat-trick of goals against Moreau Boher, and young Brian Ryan, who would have seen a bit of league time earlier this year, he's obviously a very talented young player as well. But I think Doon, who've been regularly in the latter stages of the championship, would have to be favourites.
Yeah, but if you place the form against each other here, so Doon drew a Patrickswell and Adair. Patrickswell are obviously reigning county champions, and Adair pushed Patrickswell close in the other group game. You put that up against South Liberties beating Moreau Boher, who were one of the weaker senior teams, and then Monaleen as well, which would be could be stronger probably in football. And you just think, I find it hard to see Doon beaten here. We played them probably about a month ago, I'd say, a week before they drew a Patrickswell, and they should have beaten Patrickswell. They conceded a goal and 2 points, I think, in injury time. Aaron Gallan got a goal, and then I think he got a point to win it. And that day, Darragh O'Donovan was playing centre back that day and kind of sat back and controlled things so good on the ball. They were quick out of traps. They were poor in the second and third quarters against us, and then they started really kind of powering on with Pat Ryan coming into the game and Barry Murphy coming into the game as well. Doon were in the county final a couple of years ago, and I'd expect them to be back in the semi-finals. They'll probably feel harsh done by that they're not in the semi-finals direct, but it might necessarily be a bad thing, especially after a 3-week break. Funnily enough, the teams that are in the semi-finals, namely Kilmallock and Patrickswell, could be sitting ducks for a team coming through with a bit of momentum from a quarter final and with a game under the belt. So I'm sure they've been playing practice games over the last couple of weeks, and a good few of the well lads, there's not too many of them will be playing really top end football, so they'll just be focusing on hurling. But it's almost like the Munster champions going into the All-Ireland semi-final situation with 4 or 5 weeks off, and a lot of them have been beaten. It's not an ideal situation. I don't know if the time off is actually a reward for the teams that are through to the semi-finals, because I do think they could potentially be sitting ducks.
Yeah, I think Doon might have 1 or 2 lads involved with Ula. I know Richie English was with them before, and they might be in the Limerick football semi-final. But the fact that they've picked up an under-21 title in the meantime, they've obviously had a few games there, and just by virtue of winning that, you've got quality young players who are probably scattered around the team. So assuming Doon come through here, will they be ready to kind of knock off one of the big 2 that's already through? Aaron Gillan has had a finger injury. I've seen him in a cast on his Instagram where I'd be gawking away. So will that be right? Will he get enough game time in the meantime so that he's ready? So all of those factors are in there and make it a very interesting Limerick Championship. Just in the Louth Championship this weekend, St. Fecans are against Naomh Maneen. In Meath, Rathother are against Kildalkey, Blackhall Gales are against Clonagale, Longwood are against Trim. Trim are going for a minor, senior, intermediate treble, which is some going, and then Dunboyne are also against Nafina. Did you have a point you wanted to make on that?
Yeah, no, I was actually out running in Dunboyne the other day. It's only 5 minutes from where I live up in Dublin, and there's a couple of lovely pitches there, about 100 metres or 150 metres down the road from the GA club, and they were actually out there training the other night. The St. Peter's Dunboyne hurlers did a good numbers there, and it was interesting to see Sean Boylan rock in and watch the session, which I thought was interesting. Hurling would obviously be his first love, and he was a hurler before he was ever a footballer. So I just thought that was interesting as well. I'm sure there's lots of GA legends and club legends getting back into club venues, maybe that they hadn't been in for a while, but I just thought that was an interesting one.
Absolutely. The Tipperary club hurling semi-finals are on this weekend. Lockmore Castleiney against Nina Aero, Drummond against Killadangan, and I've already done a preview with Shane Brophy of the Nina Guardian, so please check that out as well. But just your own thoughts on it. I mean, Killadangan came through with a pretty comprehensive win over Toomevara, 316 to 18 points. I felt they made hard work of it for long spells. Nina Aero shot Thurles 312 to 18. Thurles only scored their first point after 29 minutes and 18 seconds, which was incredible. Burrisally, they were knocked out as champions, beaten on penalties by Drummond. Finished 419 to 128, and then 3-1 on penalties. It really was incredible stuff. And then Lockmore saw off champions from a couple of years ago, Clonalty Rossmore, 221 to 20 points. So Lockmore Castleiney against Nina Aero. What do you reckon about that one?
These are 2 really intriguing semi-finals, in fairness. Lockmore, I saw Lockmore against Kilruane, was fairly impressed with them. Just kind of outside of the McGraths, the 3 McGraths, and even Evan Sweeney as well. They've got lots of talent all over the pitch. And just chatting to Frankie McGrath, and he was saying about the emphasis they're placing on their defence, because they have been conceding high scores. They have definitely tightened things up a bit. Didn't concede a goal last weekend. All the pressure is on Nina. So Nina knocked out the favourites, beat them pretty comprehensively, and now the pressure is on them, having not delivered. Nina probably hadn't delivered a really good performance since they beat Thurles 2 years ago in the knockout stages. So now the pressure is on them, and now they have to deliver against a pretty tough Lockmore side, which have been kept busy between hurling and football. I just think if I was a gambling man, and you're thinking, what am I guaranteed I'm going to get out of either of these? What are my guarantees? With Lockmore, I'd say you have a fair idea of what you're going to get. They're going to perform to a pretty high level. The McGraths are going to be reasonably influential. On the Nina side, Jake Morris, outstanding last weekend. Tommy Heffernan, Mikey Heffernan, Paddy Murphy, all these lads. But the consistency just hasn't been there for the talent that they have. So if I was a betting man, I had to place a fiver on this, it would be on Lockmore, just because I know what I'm going to get out of them every day. Nina probably have more potential, but potential is great on paper. You need to sort of see it on the pitch. So I'm going to be probably a Doubting Thomas with Nina until I see it. And to be honest with you, I'm going to be a Doubting Thomas with Nina until they win a Tipperary title. And that's probably just the way it is because of the talent that they have.
Yeah, and we've often probably said that about the Cork hurlers. Until they win it, I don't actually believe that they'll win in All Ireland. But I think there's a very good spread of forwards in this Nenagh team. Like Paddy Murphy, very big physical player who can hurl. He could kind of set the tone as he did against Thurles early on. I think Thurles, if they could go back again, maybe they'd have looked at the idea of putting Ronan Maher on Jake Morris from the get-go, and like he had a hat-trick in early doors, 2 beautiful finishes, and then a well put away penalty. But they did
thought that was very strange, Shane. Thought that was very strange that neither Mickey Cahill or Ronan Maher picked up Jake Morris.
Yeah.
I thought it was surely slightly obvious that he was the one that was really going to hurt him, and I thought he would have been the obvious one, even if it reduced his impact going up the pitch. I was surprised at that. I don't think Loughmore be making the same mistake. I know John Ryan picked up Keane Darcy when they played Kilruane and kept him out of the game completely. Now he's a bigger kind of a player. I'd say he could probably pick up Jake Morris as well, even though Jake Morris would be a bit smaller and maybe a bit quicker side player than Keane Darcy, but he could pick him up again, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say Loughmore want to keep John Maher in the half back line because he gets on an awful lot of balls, sweeps up, he's so athletic, he's a Tipperary footballer, and he would have been a Tipperary under 21 hurler as well. But he could be another lad who might be able to do a good tagging job on Jake Morris. So from the Nenagh point of view, Hugh Maloney went off injured before half time, which meant Barry Heffernan had to go back full back. Now speaking with Shane Brophy, he reckons there'll be different changes, that Barry Heffernan will stay centre back where he was cruising around the place. And I think it's probably no surprise that Nenagh only scored 5 points in the second half for a couple of reasons. You didn't have Barry Heffernan running the show and bursting out from the half back line, and maybe that containment thing too, where you just want to make sure that Thurles don't get a couple of goals and that kind of sparks a comeback, because these things can always happen. Comebacks happen all the time, so you want more or less your premier defender to be as close to goal as possible, just to shut up shop. But would you be worried? Would you be worried for Nenagh at all, the fact that they scored just 5 points in the second half and no Hugh Maloney possibly?
Yeah, it was more of a blitz, wasn't it? Really, it was a blitz in the first 20 or 25 minutes. I'd be more worried about the fact that Hugh Maloney could be missing, because who are Loughmore going to plant in the edge of the square? They were probably going to plant him in anyway, but John McGrath will probably in the edge of the square now, and you can't throw anybody in on John McGrath. You're going to have to probably put one of your best defenders on him. So that'll be interesting to see. As Shane Brophy said, if they don't drop Barry Heffernan back, you could be feeding someone to the wolves at full back unless he's fairly well protected. So that's probably the big bearing, and that's what the thing with the game's been so quickly, kind of back to back to back. If you do pick up an injury, and we said this earlier, the knock-on effect of one person getting injured just can affect your whole team. As you said, Nenagh didn't have half as much going forward in the second half than last day because they pulled their best defender back from centre back to full back, and then that driving force was gone. Yes, the ship was steady in around there, but they weren't going forward with the same kind of emphasis that they were in the first half. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there, because Loughmore will definitely be aiming to get something fairly big out of John McGrath and probably Evan Sweeney inside there if there's any doubts or frailties in the Nenagh full back line.
Yeah, if Nenagh can get 60 minutes of danger from Jake Morris, and it's not just an early score and blitz, if Tommy Heffernan can put more over the bar than he puts wide, because he was very, very good against Thurles but did have a few wides. Mikey Heffernan was quiet. If he can get into the game, if Paddy Murphy can keep showing, there's like Dara Quinn, if he can take over the game in the half back line too. I reckon if Nenagh hit their height and if Loughmore hit their height, Nenagh will win this game. But like you, I still have this sneaky suspicion that Loughmore just might come through, and plenty of that team has won a county title in the not too distant past, so just about nudge for them. The Drum and Inch versus Kildangan game, I think Drum might have been a little bit stung by Shane Brophy putting them at number 8 in the power rankings of the, when we were at the quarter-final stage, and they very much stepped up against Bursley, used to the ball very good, used to the substitutes very good. David Butler came on, had a huge impact. Johnny Campion had a big impact. Seamus Callan. But even the fact that they played 24 hours after Kildangan, well, maybe even a day and a half, because I think they were the early throw-in, and they had to play extra time. See, the likes of Seamus Callan had to get his calf strapped during extra time, because probably cramping up a bit as well. Will that kind of have an impact in terms of this game?
I think it will have an impact in a week. Realistically, they played 80 minutes, and the drama and emotions and everything that comes with a penalty shootout as well. Like remember you put up a clip on our game there of that point Callan got in Thurles a couple of weeks ago where he soloed. Like, will he be able to be capable of doing something like that this weekend, just given the exertions of last weekend and a possible injury that he's carrying into it? Because in order for Drum to win, I think he's going to have to do things like that, and he's going to have to be in the full of his health, and just that kind of lingering doubt that, you know, their main man might only be at 70 or 80%. I think like this is another glorious opportunity for Kildangan. They would have been very put out over their county final performance last year. Some of the same problems are still rearing their head with, you know, the bad kind of wides that they're having, but they're still putting up big scores, and they still have the potential to put up a massive score. And I just based on freshness and the fact that I think Kildangan are just coming right when they need to come right, I'd probably have the edge with Kildangan as well. Like, Boris were built up to kind of take that, or Drum were built up to take down Borrisoleigh, and they did that, and it was a real emotional roller coaster of a match. And it's just a bit of a lull, and the physical lull that will come with that. Whereas Kildangan still have a massive point to prove after last year, and would probably think that they have too much talent not to have a county title under their belt at this stage. So I'd probably be favouring Kildangan here.
Like, Drum and Inch put up 4-19 against Borrisoleigh, but probably a couple of those goals should have never happened. I mean, Seamus Callan scored a dip and free from 35 to 40 yards, and I think the sun might have been in the eyes of the lads that were on the line. Even so, he should be stopping it. But it was because of Mountain that free was even brought up far enough so he could strike at it. The other goal came when David Butler left the hurley in on the keeper when he was coming out with the ball. He snigged the keeper in the hand, who turned around and blasted the ball at him. So instead of having a free out for Borrisoleigh during extra time, they ended up with a ruck ball or a throw-in ball on the 21, ends up with a goal for Drum. So there was will they get those amount of goals for cheap against Kildangan? And maybe they will, but like Sweeney at centre back is going to sweep all day. You've got Alan Flynn beside him. Like, there's a quality of good players up and down the team. Willie Connors is in midfield. Joe Gallagher's a good ball winner. I'm probably forgetting a couple of other lads, but you've Paul Flynn, Dan O'Mara, Ty Gallagher. A lot of lads who are very comfortable. Seymour. Yeah, Billy Seymour, of course, who probably is yet to catch fire in this year's championship. We saw him scoring goals for fun for the Tipp under-20s last year. So the point being is they have a great spread of players across the field, really good players, not superstars, but really good players. And if they don't gift goals to Drum and Inch the way Borrisoleigh did, they'll feel like they can win this game.
I'd agree with you there. Like Boris hit 29 scores to Drum's 23 last week. You take out two of those goals, and Boris, not saying they win handy, but they win by a handful. And you look at the potential for scores in the Kildangan attack, and obviously with Alan Flynn and a few more lads kind of contributing out the field, Willie Connors as well. Like, I just think Drum have that reliance on Callan, and don't get me wrong, it's great to have a player like that, but if he's not at 100%, and if he's kept out of the game at all, they will struggle. Whereas, if Billy Seymour doesn't play well for Kildangan, they still have 3 or 4 more lads that are going to pick up the load. They have a greater spread of scores, and I just think they have a bit of a point to prove after last year. And I think it'll be a Kildangan Lockmore final. But it's hard to call that with too much confidence. But of the 2 semi-finals, I'd be more confident in Kildangan going through. I think Kildangan will win that game.
I'm actually not confident in either. I think earlier in the week I was thinking more Drum and Inch, because of the way, the way a win like that can solidify a team and make everyone believe all of a sudden, maybe we are good enough. Because they weren't that far away from Borrisoleigh last year in the county quarter final. But at the same time, it's not as if anyone has been tipping them to do a whole lot. So maybe their confidence isn't at the very, very height that it could be. But I think James Woodlock will be baiting into them all week. Lads, if you're good enough to beat a team that got all the way to the All-Ireland final, why wouldn't you be able to beat Kildangan? Look at Kildangan, they've gotten to 2 finals in the last couple of years. 2016, I think it was, got beaten out the gate by Thurles, didn't perform. Got to a county final last year, didn't perform. We'll show them up here again. Plenty of you lads have won a county title, was it 2011? So I think that's what he'll be drumming into them.
So you've just given him his team talk.
I think I have, yeah. No problem, Woody. But let us know out there what you think, who you think are going to win these two games. I think they're both so hard to call, but very much looking forward to them. And of course, just to touch in on Westmeath as well, Lough Lane Gales there against Devlin, and Raheny are against Castle Pollard. So I think that's about the height of it, is it? We nearly have it all said.
Hopefully the stream worked okay second time around. I think everything went to plan anyway.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael Verney. And again, brought to you by Slattery Sullivan Insurances. If you want 10% off all new business quotes, call 067 56705 and give them the reference quote or again. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shane. Come on.